The raven's call carried on the autumn wind that blew across the battlements of the Red Keep, its voice mingling with the sound of distant waves lapping at Blackwater Bay. The courtyard below bustled with uneasy energy, as though the very stones sensed a shift in the natural order of things. King Robert Baratheon was dead, and Lord Eddard Stark, Ned to his friends, had never felt a weight like this in all his years of duty and honor. He stood at a high window, looking down upon the city of King's Landing, trying to reconcile himself to the realization that the crown now rested on his head. He had not sought it. In truth, never once had he yearned for such power. He had come south to serve as Hand of the King, to help an old friend rule the Seven Kingdoms and keep the realm at peace. But Robert had lain on his deathbed, a boar's tusk ripping through him, and with his final whispers he had declared, "Ned, you must protect the realm. You'll rule in my stead, until my son comes of age." A son who turned out not to be Robert's at all. Faced with a swirl of lies and hidden parentage, the realm on the brink of fracturing, Ned Stark had taken the burden to keep the realm from plunging into a war that might destroy them all. Yet the will he held in his hands had named him regent and protector. It was a momentous document, one that he initially intended to use to ensure the rightful heir, whether that was Robert's alleged children or someone else, would take the Iron Throne. But events had moved quickly. There had been the confrontation with Queen Cersei, the question of Joffrey's parentage, the forging of alliances in the shadows, Varys's whispering counsel, Littlefinger's serpentine charm, the gold cloaks switching allegiances in the moonlight. And in the end, Ned Stark had done the unthinkable. He had taken the throne himself, compelled by duty, honor, and the immediate threat that House Lannister posed to the stability of the realm. He could still feel the Iron Throne scraping against his back as he first sat upon it, the hammered swords of conquered kings pressing into him like 1,000 accusing fingers. Word had spread like wildfire. Ned Stark was crowned king. Some men hailed him as a just usurper, a second coming of Aegon the Conqueror in the sense of might and rightful cause. Others called him a traitor, a northern wolf grown rabid with ambition. Lord Tywin Lannister, outraged, had roused his bannermen. Renley Baratheon fled the city in disbelief, riding for Highgarden with a small retinue to gather support for his own claim. Stannis Baratheon, cold and unyielding as an island fortress, had begun massing ships on Dragonstone. One misstep, and Ned would be caught in a storm of swords that would leave blood and ash across the Seven Kingdoms. Ned turned from the window as the city's sprawl made him dizzy. It was too large, too chaotic for a man used to clean northern air and the sound of snow crunching beneath one's boots. In the corners of the room, silent as specters, his guards in stark livery, men who had traveled south with him, stood watch. Their presence reminded him of Winterfell's great hall, its sturdy walls, the warmth of the hearth where he had presided as Warden of the North. That life felt lost now, like a summer dream replaced by an endless winter. He longed for it terribly, even as he steeled himself for what lay ahead. A soft knock on the door startled him from his thoughts. Ser Roderick Castle entered, snow-white whiskers trembling with concern. "Your Grace," he said, dipping his head awkwardly. Ned found it jarring to hear those words directed at him. He had asked Ser Roderick to keep calling him "my lord" or simply Lord Stark, but protocol had become an unyielding chain around him. He was King Eddard for better or worse. "There is news from the Riverlands, Your Grace," Ser Roderick continued, his voice weighted by seriousness. "Lord Tywin Lannister's forces have begun raiding again, burning small folk villages and proclaiming that the Iron Throne is held by a false king. The Outriders bring word that Tywin's banners have been seen near the border of the Westerlands and the Riverlands. Lord Tully is preparing his defenses, but he seeks your guidance." Ned closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the lines of care on Catelyn's face, the quiet dignity in her eyes. She was of House Tully, daughter of Riverrun, and now queen consort, although the notion of her wearing a crown seemed as strange as the crown resting on his own brow. He had wished to send her north to keep her out of the Lannisters' grasp, but she had refused. "My family must see I stand with you," she had said. "With us." How he wanted to shield her from the ugly politics and the even uglier war that threatened to explode. He turned back to Ser Roderick. "Have any of Tywin's men crossed the Trident yet? Or threatened Riverrun directly?" Ser Roderick shook his head. "Not as of the last Raven, but the scouts expect that to change soon. Tywin is no fool. He'll test the waters, see if your rule is strong or if the realm will fracture further." A low fury thrummed in Ned's chest. The Lannisters still refused to bend the knee to acknowledge the rightful authority that had passed from Robert to him, or perhaps to anyone who was not themselves. Tywin Lannister was not a man to let go of power easily, particularly after his grandson Joffrey's claim to the throne had been so thoroughly discredited. "Summon the small council," Ned said quietly. "We'll decide how to proceed." The small council was small indeed these days. Varys attended, gliding in on silent feet, bearing careful smiles and watchful eyes. Peter Baelish had survived the purge of the gold cloaks by professing loyalty to Ned's cause, claiming he had only ever wanted what was best for the realm. Grand Maester Pycelle still tottered in, though Ned distrusted him almost instinctively. And there was Ser Barristan Selmy, who had sworn himself to Ned's side after Joffrey's parentage scandal broke. Stannis remained in self-imposed exile, refusing to bend the knee as well, insisting that by all rights the crown should have passed to him. In the council chamber, a hush fell. Ned took his seat at the head of the table, still feeling more hand than king, more caretaker than ruler. Outside, bells tolled softly in memory of Robert. A hush lingered, broken only by the shuffle of chairs. "Lord Tywin Lannister tests our resolve," Ned began. His voice sounded calmer than he felt. "We have received word that his raiders move against the Riverlands. Lord Tully prepares the defense, but I do not wish to see the Riverlands set aflame in some pointless show of power. War may be inevitable, but if we can stave it off, we must." Littlefinger steepled his fingers. "Lord Tywin is famously stubborn, Your Grace. He will not yield unless you show him that he faces the full might of the Iron Throne. A small demonstration might serve to remind him where the real power lies." Varys nodded, offering a soft smile. "A cunning notion, my lord. Perhaps we dispatch a royal host with your banners, led by a commander of unimpeachable loyalty. Tywin might look twice before he crosses swords with the United Realm." Ned's jaw tightened. "I do not want to send men off to die for my rule. Robert would never have wanted his kingdom splintered like this. But Tywin's men burn our people's homes. We cannot allow that to go unanswered." Barristan Selmy's voice resonated with authority. "Your Grace, I can lead the Kingsguard and a force of loyal knights to the Riverlands. I have served this realm for decades, under 3 kings now. I know the price of indecision." Ned nodded thoughtfully. In truth, he did not relish sending Barristan away. He valued the man's honor and skill here in King's Landing. But what good was a virtuous knight if the realm burned? "Very well, Ser Barristan. You will have a host, but not large enough to bleed the city of defenses. Show Tywin we stand united, but do not provoke an outright battle unless he forces your hand. I want him to see we are prepared, not eager for a fight." The old knight bowed, white hair glinting like newly fallen snow. "As you command." The council continued, conversation roving from supply lines to the loyalty of the gold cloaks. Ned listened, but his mind wandered to the face of Cersei Lannister, the contempt she had shown in the final moments before the truth was laid bare. No, Joffrey was not Robert's. He was Jaime's son, born of incest. A hideous lie that might have toppled a kingdom. If Ned had not acted, the boy would have been crowned, the realm would have been none the wiser, and the line of true Baratheon blood would have ended with Robert. But was the realm truly better off with him on the throne? An untested king from the north, a man who had never craved power, torn between duty and compassion. Would the small folk even care who wore the crown as long as the roads were safe and the harvest was good? The meeting wore on. When the council dispersed, Ned walked the corridors of the Red Keep alone, refusing a guard detail. Shadows lengthened as dusk set in. Behind every corner, he sensed intrigue and potential betrayal. The politics of the South churned his stomach. So many alliances were woven in secret, so many knives were hidden in the folds of cloaks, so many tongues dripped with false flattery. In the North, a man's word was his bond, and the cruelty of the cold demanded an honest acceptance of reality. Here, illusions thrived in the heat. He passed beneath a flickering torch and heard hushed voices around the corner. Curiosity piqued, he stepped silently, drawing close enough to hear. "It changes nothing," an unfamiliar voice whispered. "King Eddard or not, House Lannister will not relent. There will be war." A second voice, equally hushed, responded, "We'll bide our time. When Lord Tywin marches, we'll strike from within." Ned's heart pounded. There were conspirators even inside these walls, men who plotted for Lannister gold or out of Lannister fear. Stepping around the corner, he found 2 minor courtiers in hushed conversation, but when they saw him, they recoiled in terror. They dropped into bows so low it seemed their foreheads might strike the floor. He recognized them vaguely, one a steward to a Lannister retainer, the other a minor knight who had once followed Renley. Both trembled as Ned's gray eyes bore into them. "Your Grace," the steward stammered. We spoke out of turn." Ned let the moment stretch, reminding himself that fear alone was not a just ruler's tool. He was not the Mad King. He would not roast these men for uttering uncertain loyalties. "Speak freely," he said, though his voice was stern. "I will have no false flattery. If you stand with House Lannister, then speak it." The minor knight swallowed hard. "We serve the crown, your grace. But the city is rife with rumors. Some say Tywin Lannister will lay siege to King's Landing if you do not step down. Others say you mean to march on Casterly Rock." Ned stared at them for a long moment. "If Tywin chooses war, blood will spill. It will not be by my choosing." He took a breath. "Go. But think carefully about the words you whisper in the corridors. The realm has ears, and every ear has a sword behind it." They scattered like startled mice. Ned walked on unsettled. He had hoped his honor would serve as a bulwark against suspicion, that the small folk would see he meant to protect them. But these were not the loyal sons and daughters of the North. King's Landing was a viper's nest of rumor and half-truths, and each coil threatened to tighten around him. He came to his solar, pushing open the heavy door. Catelyn was there, seated by a table bearing a half-finished meal. She rose the moment he entered, her eyes filled with concern. He closed the door behind him and let out a slow breath, removing his cloak and draping it over a chair. She approached him tentatively, placing a hand on his chest. "You look tired," she said gently. "More tired than I have ever seen you." He took her hand in his. "Tired does not begin to describe it. I feel as though I stand on a narrow bridge over a deep chasm, and an army of wights is bearing down from each side." She managed a ghost of a smile at the old northern reference. "Is it truly so dire? Tywin Lannister raids the Riverlands. Stannis lurks on Dragonstone, claiming the throne is his by right of blood, and I cannot say he's entirely wrong in that regard. Renley is raising banners in the Reach, though for what purpose I do not know. Perhaps he believes he has a claim as well, or perhaps he simply wants to guard Highgarden from the storms to come. And here in the city, men whisper of betrayal, of the Lannisters' gold, of a false king on the Iron Throne." She squeezed his hand. "We will endure. Together." Her faith stirred a warmth in his chest, a reminder that love and loyalty still existed in a world of shadows. "How are our girls?" he asked, voice quieter. "And Bran? I miss them every moment." Catelyn's gaze flickered with a mother's worry. "Sansa tries to be brave, but she has lost her betrothal to Joffrey, and the court whispers do not help her nerves. Arya chafes under the idea of being a lady at court. She longs to train with a sword, with that Braavosi instructor of hers. Bran is safe in Winterfell, as is Rickon, though I worry for Robb, forced to bear the responsibilities of the North in our absence." Ned nodded, letting a pang of guilt settle in his heart. He had left the North to serve as the king's hand, never imagining he would be crowned himself. His children were scattered, their innocence threatened by the savage swirl of ambition and war. "I should have refused Robert's offer from the start," he said, voice heavy. "Then none of this." "It is fate," Catelyn interrupted softly. "You did what honor demanded. Robert named you protector, and you uncovered a secret that could have destroyed the realm. If that secret had been allowed to thrive, who knows what chaos would grip us now." He forced a thin smile. "Then it is my duty, my destiny, to wear this crown, whether I like it or not." He parted from her and looked out the window, watching the moonlight cast pale reflections on the waters of Blackwater Bay. "I will not let the Seven Kingdoms bleed if I can help it. I only hope the realm will not tear itself apart before I find a way to keep it whole." They ate a quiet meal together, each lost in their own worries. When Ned lay down that night, exhaustion claimed him quickly, but his sleep was plagued with half-remembered dreams. Images of Robert, young and full of laughter, turned to Robert pale and dying with a boar's tusk in his gut. He saw Tywin Lannister's gold eyes fixed upon him from atop a red-scaled dragon, though that made no sense, yet in dreams sense mattered little. He heard the howling of dire wolves echo through the Red Keep. Then he saw the Iron Throne, blades dripping crimson as though the seat itself wept blood. His eyes opened in the darkness, and he lay awake until the dawn. When morning came, Ned rose and prepared for another day of council meetings and quiet terror. He dressed simply, refusing the opulent garments pressed on him by court tailors. Instead, he wore dark leathers, a cloak of wolfgrey, and a small golden crown that sat uncomfortably atop his head. The rest of the day was devoted to the administration of a kingdom, a duty which Robert had so often shirked. The Exchequer's ledgers, complaints from the free cities about shipping routes, negotiations with the faith. Even the most mundane tasks felt burdensome now because each decision carried the possibility of fueling further dissent. Later, a raven arrived from the Vale. Lisa Arryn, Catelyn's sister, wrote in a cryptic tone, refusing to send help or come to King's Landing, apparently content to remain nestled behind the high walls of the Eyrie, safe in the mountains. Ned thought back to the letter that had started all of this, Lisa's claims about the Lannisters murdering Jon Arryn. He wondered now at her motives. Did she seek to keep the Vale apart from the conflicts of the realm, or did she have ambitions of her own? The letter offered little clarity, only a vague promise of neutrality. That evening, Ned gathered his household knights and advisors, men he trusted. Ser Rodrik, Jory Castle, his old friend and companion Howland Reed, arrived from the Neck to pledge his fealty to the new king, and a handful of northern lords who had braved the journey south. They met in a small solar, out of earshot from the usual parade of flatterers. "I would have your counsel," Ned said, arms folded. "The realm is brittle as thin ice. Tywin Lannister might soon provoke a war. Stannis believes himself the rightful king by law, yet he offers no olive branch. And Renley moves among the lords of the Reach, forging alliances, though to what end remains unclear." Howland Reed, a slight man with keen eyes, spoke first. "Your Grace, the Crannogmen stand by you as they always have. But be wary. Kingship is a new shape for you, and many in the South will not accept it lightly. They want a king who was born to it or who holds the mightiest claim. You hold it by Robert's will and your own sense of duty, but they may ask, is that enough?" Jory Castle grimaced. "We could try to appeal to Stannis. He respects duty, if nothing else. If we could make peace with him, perhaps he would serve as your hand or stand as your equal in the governance of the realm." Ned shook his head. "I doubt Stannis will ever accept half measures. He wants the throne or nothing. And the matter of Joffrey's parentage only gives him more cause to see me as a usurper." Ser Rodrik tapped the table. "If House Tyrell sides with Renly, we could be faced with war on two fronts, from the Westerlands and from the Reach. The North cannot hope to hold the entire realm in check." Ned could feel the tension in the room, the unspoken thought, is there any path that does not lead to bloodshed? He answered quietly, "Then we must be smarter. We must use diplomacy where we can. Reach out to Dorne, to the Iron Islands, though Balon Greyjoy might be as restless as ever, and to the Stormlands. We must forge alliances as Robert once did to topple the Mad King, though I would do it to preserve peace, not break it." They debated late into the night, discussing which ravens to send, which messengers to dispatch, how best to spin the narrative of Ned's accession to the throne, that Robert named him protector for the good of the realm, and that circumstances forced him to accept the crown to prevent the Iron Throne from falling into unworthy hands. Before they departed, Ned asked to speak privately with Ser Rodrik. "You have known me longer than many here," Ned said. "You trained me in swordsmanship when I was a boy. Do you think me fit to rule?" Ser Rodrik considered, his whiskers quivering. "Your Grace, I know your heart, and I know the burden that rests on your shoulders. If you remain true to your honor, to your compassion, you have within you the making of a fine king." But he paused. Ned raised an eyebrow. "Speak freely, but ruling may require choices that do not always align with the personal honor you hold so dear. I have seen good men forced to do terrible things for the greater good. I do not envy you, nor do I doubt you. But remember that sometimes a king cannot be just a good man, he must also be a strong one." Ned nodded slowly, the words etching themselves into his soul. Strength and honor. They might coexist, but would they survive the test of war? In the days that followed, the realm stirred. Barristan and Selmy departed with a disciplined force of knights, banners of the dire wolf, and the crowned stag intertwined to display the unity of the new reign, an attempt to remind everyone that Robert's line, in spirit if not in direct blood, still held the throne in the form of his chosen protector and brother-in-arms. Reports arrived of skirmishes along the border of the Riverlands. Tywin's men clashed with Tully outriders, though no pitched battle had erupted yet. Meanwhile, in the Stormlands, some lords declared for Stannis, but others, unsure of where the winds of power were blowing, hesitated or turned to Renly. The younger Baratheon brother had always been charming, always forging friendships and alliances with ease. Rumors whispered that Mace Tyrell was entertaining a marriage alliance, Renly and Margaery Tyrell. A queen from Highgarden would bring with her a vast host of swords and riches. If that rumor held any truth, it meant Renly might soon press his own claim to the throne, citing Robert's blood over Ned's appointment. Amid this uncertainty, Cersei Lannister and her children were still in King's Landing under what Ned could only call house arrest, though he tried to keep it from seeming so blatant. He would not stoop to cruelty, but neither could he allow them to simply walk free. The day he summoned Cersei to the throne room was bleak and overcast. The High Septon had called for a day of prayer in Robert's memory, and the bells tolled mournfully. Ned sat atop the Iron Throne, its spikes and edges unforgiving, a constant reminder that no king sat there easily. Guards lined the hall in Stark livery, and the gold cloaks of the city watched those who had remained loyal. Cersei swept in, her golden hair coiled in an elaborate style, her emerald eyes glinting with pride and simmering resentment. Behind her walked her brother Jaime, free from a brief imprisonment on the condition he swear no violence within these walls. 2 Lannister guards followed, faces set like stone. She did not kneel. Instead, she inclined her head just enough to suggest she acknowledged the new order. The tension in the hall was as thick as the humidity in a southern summer. "Queen Cersei," Ned said, forcing himself to speak calmly. "I have summoned you to discuss the matter of your children, Joffrey, Tommen, and Myrcella." Her eyes flashed. "They are mine, Lord Stark, and they are of Lannister blood. Their place is with me." Ned's gaze never wavered. He thought of how Robert, in those final days, still believed Joffrey to be his son. He thought of how the truth of Joffrey's parentage had unraveled so much trust. They are not of Baratheon blood, yet they bear that name. This realm was led to believe Joffrey was the rightful heir. The realm was deceived. Cersei's lips curved in a bitter smile. "You speak of deception. My father says you took the throne by betrayal, by forging a false will from a dying man." Ned resisted the urge to scowl. Robert wrote that will himself. But perhaps it matters little now. The question is how the realm proceeds. Your father has chosen to raid the Riverlands in protest. This cannot continue. Jaime's hand twitched near the hilt of his sword, but he kept silent. Cersei's posture was that of a lioness cornered. She might lash out at any moment. "You expect me to leash my father? Or to dissuade him from avenging the insult you have done our house? You took our seat of power. You threatened my children. What do you expect?" "I want peace," Ned said, voice rising slightly, though he fought to keep it level. "If Tywin Lannister will come to parley, I am prepared to offer him terms. Land, gold, even offices at court if he will lay down arms. But the days of a Lannister on the throne are done." Cersei took a step forward, her face a mask of fury. "That is your generous offer? My father will never bow to you, and neither will I." Jaime's eyes flicked between them, and Ned could almost see the aggression simmering in the Kingslayer's tense stance. There, in the echoing hall, it seemed violence could erupt in a heartbeat. Ned stood, the weight of the crown tangling in his hair. "Hear me well. I do not want your father's knee, only an end to bloodshed. If he will not talk, then I will send my banners to drive him from the Riverlands." Cersei matched his stance. "Drive him out if you can. You will fail, and your entire line will suffer for it." A hush fell. No one dared speak. Ned met her glare with quiet resolve. "I am not Aerys Targaryen, to threaten the city with wildfire. I am not Joffrey Baratheon, to fling heads from the walls. I am Eddard Stark, and I will have justice and mercy in equal measure for those who deserve them. But if your father continues to raid my people, I will respond." She said nothing more. She merely stood there, seething, until Ned signaled for the guards. Jaime and the Lannister guards escorted Cersei out, and the doors to the throne room slammed shut in their wake. The tension lingered like a stale wind. Ned sat again, pressing a hand over his eyes. If Tywin refused any negotiation, if Renley married Margaery Tyrell, if Stannis launched his fleet from Dragonstone, then the realm would be at war. Each day, the possibility loomed larger. Kingship felt like carrying a mountain on his shoulders. That night, Ned stood on a balcony overlooking the Blackwater. The moon shimmered on the inky waves, and a breeze rolled in that smelled faintly of salt and fish. He remembered the wolfswood of his youth, the hush of the forest, the sound of his own breath in the crisp air. So far away, the city sprawled around him, alive with torches, whose orange glow reminded him of 1,000 tiny flickering eyes. So many lives rested in his hands. He found himself speaking to the wind, as though to Robert or to his father, Rickard Stark. "I never wanted this, yet here I am. If I fail, thousands will die. Tell me how to succeed with honor." No answer came, only the gentle lapping of the tide. He reminded himself that the gods gave no easy answers. Duty was a lonely road, and the weight of the crown was a solitary burden. He gazed at the horizon until his eyes grew heavy, then returned to his chambers where Catelyn waited, a single candle burning in the gloom. She said nothing, only opened her arms to him. He stepped into her embrace, letting the silent comfort of her presence give him strength. In the following weeks, the realm's eyes turned to the Riverlands. Tywin Lannister's forays continued, burning farmsteads and small villages that refused to pay him tribute. Barristan Selmy's force engaged in skirmishes with Lannister outriders. Lords of the Riverlands, outraged by the destruction, clamored for war in full. They spoke of pushing westward, of taking the fight to Tywin's doorstep. Each day, the number of ravens arriving with pleas and demands grew. But in King's Landing, Ned had not been idle. He sent envoys to Dorne, reminding Prince Doran Martell that his father had once arranged a marriage between Elia Martell and Rhaegar Targaryen, a union that ended in tragedy, slain by the Lannisters, as many in Dorne would never forget. Perhaps the Martells still harbored a deep hatred for House Lannister. If so, they might be persuaded to side with Ned. Gold, trade routes, and justice for Elia's memory were offered in subtle terms. Ned disliked the idea of buying alliances with coin and the promise of vengeance, but the realm's survival might hinge on it. He also reached out to the Iron Islands, though with far less hope. Balon Greyjoy was proud and rash, and he had once rebelled against the Iron Throne. Still, if neutrality could be bought with trade concessions, it might save the northern coasts from raids during this precarious time. Catelyn suggested that she might travel to the area to speak with her sister, Lisa, face to face. Perhaps blood ties could sway the Vale to support Ned's rule, or at least remain neutral if war came. Ned agreed, though reluctantly. He feared for her safety on the mountain road, but he knew her strength and determination. She departed with a small escort of loyal men. For a moment, it seemed as though the realm might hold its breath, waiting to see if Ned's diplomatic overtures could bear fruit. Then a raven arrived from Highgarden bearing a marriage announcement. Renley Baratheon had wed Marjorie Tyrell in a grand ceremony with the blessing of the High Septon from Old Town. The missive was rife with symbolism, boasting of the Baratheon-Tyrell alliance and emphasizing the strength of the Stormlands joined with the Reach. Rumors abounded that Renley now styled himself king, if not officially, then in the hearts of his supporters. With Mace Tyrell and the vast resources of Highgarden behind him, Renley was a formidable rival, far more dangerous than many had initially assumed. The effect on King's Landing was immediate. Where once people spoke of Stannis or of Lannister vengeance, now they whispered that Renley was the more popular choice. He was young, charming, and charismatic. Many southern lords found him more appealing than a stern northerner. And thus, Ned's greatest fear took shape, multiple challengers for the crown, all at once, fracturing the realm into warring factions. In the midst of this tension, a quiet arrival went almost unnoticed. A small ship bearing Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, loyal to Stannis Baratheon. He came under a flag of parley, seeking audience with King Eddard. When Ned received him in the Red Keep, Davos bowed humbly, though he did not seem awed by the surroundings. His plain honesty struck Ned immediately. "King Stannis sends his respects," Davos said, his voice low but firm. "And he sends me here to treat with you, King Eddard." Ned, though weary of endless politics, felt a glimmer of hope. "You come with terms from Stannis?" "He has not yet declared himself openly against me." Davos nodded. "He is torn, your grace. By law, he believes himself the rightful heir to King Robert. But he knows you to be an honorable man. He bids me to say that if you acknowledge his claim, he would show you mercy and respect. He knows you were Robert's dear friend and that Robert entrusted you as protector of the realm." Ned's pulse quickened. "He wants me to relinquish the throne and name him rightful king." Davos took a breath. "Yes, your grace. And he offers to confirm you as Lord of Winterfell, Warden of the North, and Chief Advisor to the crown. He will preserve your house, your family, and punish the Lannisters for their treachery." A hush settled. Ned paced a few steps, the weight of the iron crown pressing on his temples. One part of him cried that this was the answer, to step aside for the rightful heir by blood. Robert would have wanted the lawful line to continue, not a war of questionable claims. But so much had transpired. The realm had grown accustomed, if not comfortable, with Ned sitting the throne these last moons. Tywin Lannister still refused to yield. Renly had declared himself in all but name. If Ned simply surrendered the crown, what chaos might ensue? Davos's eyes shone with an earnest sincerity. "Your grace, my king is not a warm man, nor a particularly forgiving one. But he respects truth and law. He believes you are a man of honor. He wants peace with you if it can be had. Ned stood at the window, gazing out at the city. I want peace as well. But if I denounce my own claim, I risk splitting my supporters. The northern lords might revolt, feeling betrayed. The Riverlands might question why they bled to keep me on the throne if I yield it so easily. And there is Renley. He will not simply step aside for Stannis, not now that he's married Marjorie Tyrell and likely courted half the Reach. We'd find ourselves in another war with or without me on the throne. Davos lowered his gaze. Then what would you have me tell him? Ned turned, eyes haunted. Tell him. I must think on it. Tell him I seek no war with him, but I cannot, in good conscience, lay down the crown if it means the realm tears itself apart. I must find a way to unify us. If Stannis will not accept any compromise, such as ruling beside me or forging some accord, then I do not see how we avoid bloodshed. Davos sighed. I understand, Your Grace. I will tell him. But I fear he will not be swayed. And so the Onion Knight departed, the faint flicker of hope dwindling behind him. Ned felt the cold knot in his stomach tighten. War loomed on all sides. Even if House Martell or House Greyjoy sided with him, he would be forced to fight at least two other claimants, one of them with the cunning might of Tywin Lannister, the other with the flowered banners of Highgarden. And then there was Stannis, perhaps the most unyielding foe of all, should he decide Ned was an obstacle to justice. Days stretched into weeks. Tensions in the city rose. Whispers spread that Tywin Lannister was marching east in earnest, that the Riverlands were ablaze. The City Watch doubled patrols to prevent rioting or infiltration. The gates were locked at night, and only those with royal writ could enter or leave. Still, news trickled in of Renly's supporters seizing Storm's End, reinforcing it against any assault. Tales of Stannis' fleet spread from tavern to tavern, hushed rumors of a shadow growing in Dragonstone's halls. Then, one fateful dawn, ravens arrived from Riverrun. Barrist and Selmy had confronted Tywin's host near the Tumblestone. The short missive told of a fierce battle. Lannister outriders attempted to lure the Tully forces into a trap, but Barristan's experience saved them from annihilation. The Kingsguard Knight spoke of heavy casualties on both sides with no decisive victory. Tywin's forces withdrew west, leaving a charred battlefield behind. The letter concluded with a grim warning that Tywin was gathering more men, possibly seeking to link up with reinforcements from the south, perhaps from the Reach if Renly decided to ally with the Lannisters. The Riverlands now stood on the brink of devastation. Ned read the letter twice, his mouth set in a hard line. So it has begun, he murmured to Varys, who stood quietly at his side. Varys offered a sorrowful bow. I fear so, Your Grace. The realm stands on the precipice. Soon, we may see 4 kings at war, yourself, Stannis, Renly, and the will of House Lannister behind Joffrey, though few still believe Joffrey's claim. It is a chaos of crowns indeed. Ned scanned the letter once more, heart pounding. Send word to Barristan, hold the Riverlands if you can. Do not march on Casterly Rock without my command. We cannot fight a war on every front. Varys inclined his head, already making mental notes. And what of Stannis? Ned clenched his fists. If he demands my crown, I cannot yield. But I will offer him a truce if he stands with me against Tywin and Renly. The realm cannot withstand more fracture. Varys' smile was thin. A generous offer, but you know Lord Stannis. He will see it as a weakness, or perhaps an affront to the law he values so much. Ned closed his eyes, remembering Stannis' cold stare when they last spoke in Robert's presence. Law and duty, honor without mercy. Send the Raven anyway. Let him know that while I will not yield my crown, I offer an alliance against those who would tear the realm apart. Together, we can bring Tywin to heel and turn to Renly with a united front. If Stannis truly cares for the peace of the realm, he will at least consider it. Varys bowed deeply. As you command, Your Grace. Then Ned stood, stepping away from the table to stare at the flames in the hearth. How had it come to this? Honor demanded he protect the innocent. Duty demanded he wear a crown. Compassion demanded he find a bloodless solution. But the reality of power seemed to demand war. The words of Ser Roderick lingered. Sometimes a king must do terrible things for the greater good. At that moment, Sansa and Arya entered timidly, escorted by Septa Mordane. The girls looked anxious, having heard the grim whispers in the corridors. Sansa curtsied. Father, I heard we are at war. Arya stood behind her sister, eyes shining with questions she dared not voice. Ned's heart softened at the sight of them. The realm is troubled, my daughters. But we are doing all we can to keep peace. Sansa raised her chin, tears threatening. Will Mother be safe in the Vale? Ned tried to smile reassuringly. Your mother is strong and resourceful. She will return soon. He placed a hand on Arya's shoulder. In the meantime, you two must be careful. Trust only those we know to be true friends. The city is full of rumors. Arya's eyes burned. I can fight. Syrio says I'm getting better with the sword. Ned knelt to meet her gaze. You are a brave girl, Arya. But remember, a sword alone cannot solve every problem. Sometimes you must fight with your wits or your words. Arya nodded, though disappointment flickered on her face. Sansa simply looked at the floor, as though she carried too many thoughts. The girls departed, and Ned was left with the ache of fatherhood overshadowed by kingship. Soon, another council meeting was called, more urgent than any before. Reports of new alliances, skirmishes, and rumors that Joffrey had been whisked away from the Red Keep by Lannister sympathizers fanned the flames of panic. Ned sat, listening to each voice, trying to discern the best path. Littlefinger proposed using the city's gold, always precarious in supply, to hire mercenaries, forging an army loyal only to coin. Pycelle droned on about the need to keep the faith appeased, lest they brand Ned an unlawful usurper. Varys observed quietly, occasionally dropping a hint of gossip that might steer the conversation. Eventually, Ned rose from the council table, voice firm. Enough! We will not buy an army of cutthroats. We will not muzzle the faith through bribes. Our position is simple. Robert entrusted me with the realm's protection. A threat arises from Tywin Lannister, who will not accept the new order. Another threat arises from Renley, who crowns himself in the Reach. And Stannis lurks, demanding the throne by blood. We must defend ourselves with honor. We will call the banners of the North and the Riverlands if we must. We will treat with any lord or king who will come to the table. But we will not break the realm in a scramble for power. Peter Baelish offered a thin smile. Your Grace, I admire your idealism. Let us hope the other parties share it. Ned gave him a cold stare. You have always thrived in chaos, Littlefinger. I do not. This is a precarious time. I would have your honest counsel, not your schemes. Baelish's eyes glittered, but he bowed. As you say, Your Grace. As the council ended, an ominous hush filled the chamber. War's drumbeat sounded closer. The next day, word arrived. Tywin Lannister had begun massing a larger host at the Golden Tooth, poised to march into the Riverlands in force. The Ravens carried pleas from Riverrun, urgent requests for reinforcements. Lord Tully spoke of entire villages burnt, women and children fleeing to the castle for refuge. Catelyn had not yet returned from the Vale. Ned could only pray she was safe. Confronted with this, Ned ordered his own mobilization. Ravens flew north, calling upon the bannermen of the North. Orders were sent to the City Watch, mustering more men for the crown. Arms were distributed, walls inspected. Yet the mood in King's Landing grew ever more tense. Food prices soared, and rumors spread that the capital could face siege if Tywin or Renly marched. Some merchants tried to flee by ship, but found the royal ports locked. Fear leaked through every alleyway. One evening, while pacing the length of Maegor's Holdfast, Ned encountered Lord Varys, who appeared as though from the shadows themselves. Your Grace, a troubling rumor. Our reaches, my little birds, Varys whispered, leaning close. I hear that Queen Cersei has made contact with Renly Baratheon through secret messengers. She may be willing to offer her father's support if Renly acknowledges Joffrey as heir. Some twisted compromise meant to dethrone you. Ned's lips thinned. Renly's claim competes with Joffrey's. Would he truly acknowledge the boy as heir? Varys shrugged elegantly. Desperate times breed desperate alliances. If the Lannisters see no path to your downfall through direct war, perhaps they seek a new king to champion, one who might, in turn, legitimize Joffrey or place him high in the succession. House Lannister values power above all else. Ned was silent a moment, absorbing yet another betrayal. Keep your birds listening. If there is proof of such negotiations, I need it. The lords of the realm must see that the Lannisters would sell the throne to whoever suits their schemes. Varys bowed. As you command, Your Grace. And so the slow spiral of schemes, battles, and alliances continued, each day darker than the last. Ned stood as a lone figure of honor in a swirling tide of ambition, determined to do right by the realm, yet bound by the reality that war might be the only language his enemies understood. To the small folk, he was a distant figure, called the Wolf King in hushed tones. Some said he was too soft-hearted to survive the southern Game of Thrones. Others claimed his sword hand was as true as his heart, and that the old gods of the north might favor him. Then came the moment that changed everything. Barristan Selmy returned to King's Landing in haste, leaving a garrison at Riverrun. He brought dire news. Tywin Lannister was marching east with a force larger than before, perhaps bolstered by additional companies from the Reach. Barristan believed they meant to seize Harrenhal as a forward base, then strike south and cut off the capital. Panic suffused the streets, as though everyone felt the thunder of an army's approach. Ned called a war council. Northern lords who had trickled into the city, small contingents who arrived faster than the bulk of the forces, gathered around a massive table bearing a map of Westeros. Barristan pointed to the Riverlands. If Tywin secures Harrenhal, he commands the Trident's crossings. The roads to King's Landing become vulnerable. Lord Tully's men can harass them, but with reinforcements from the Reach, we risk a pincer movement. Tywin from the west, Renley from the south. Your Grace, we must act. How many men can we muster? Ned asked. Barristan hesitated. 15,000 loyal to you in the Riverlands, another 5,000 in the city and its surroundings, perhaps. The northern bannermen are en route, but it will take time before they arrive. Tywin likely marches with 30,000 or more, if he's truly joined by some of the Reach's levies. Renly might field another large army, should he march. Stannis remains a wild card. A heavy silence fell. The sheer disparity in numbers threatened to crush them. Ned drew a long breath. We cannot allow Tywin to take Harrenhal uncontested. We must march out to meet him before he can establish a foothold. Lord Royce, representing some Vale Knights who had arrived, cleared his throat. Your Grace, marching against Tywin might leave the city vulnerable to Renly. Unless we leave a strong force here, King's Landing itself could be taken by cunning or by force. Ned tapped the map, considering the chessboard that Westeros had become. Ser Barristan, you will command the main host. March north and meet Tywin's forces. Prevent them from crossing the Trident if you can. I will remain here with a secondary force to guard the city. If Renly marches, we will be ready. Barristan bowed. I am yours to command. As they began to finalize plans, a message arrived. Stannis had declared himself King of Westeros, forging a new banner with a burning heart and the crown stag. He demanded fealty from all lords, naming Ned Stark a usurper. Davos Seaworth wrote a personal note expressing regret that Stannis would not parley further. He believed the crown was his by right. Ned's heart sank further. If Stannis marched as well, the realm would become a slaughterhouse. In the gloom of that council chamber, Ned felt a measure of resolve harden within him. He had done everything he could to prevent war, to find common ground, to act in Robert's spirit. Yet these lords and claimants would not rest. So be it. He would fight to defend the realm, not for personal ambition, but because chaos would swallow them if he yielded to any one of these other kings. If the realm needed a wolf to keep the lions, stags, and roses at bay, then he would be that wolf, though he dreaded the cost in lives. The next morning, Ned stood atop the walls of the Red Keep, watching as Barristan Selmy and a host of knights rode out. Banners of the dire wolf flapped beside the crowned stag of Robert, a poignant reminder of past brotherhood and present necessity. Ser Barristan rode at the head, noble and unyielding, a living legend going to war once more in the twilight of his years. The small folk gathered, some cheering feebly, others cowering in fear of what might come if the Lannisters proved victorious. Ned turned away when the last soldiers vanished through the gates. His breath misted in the air. Though the day was warm by southern standards, he felt a chill that came from within. He prayed silently to the old gods in words he barely remembered from childhood. Keep them safe. End this bloodshed before it truly begins. But in his heart he feared the gods might not answer. War was upon them. Weeks passed with agonizing slowness. Ravens carried word of marches and countermarches, feints and skirmishes. Tywin's host, huge and relentless, advanced along the north bank of the Red Fork. Barristan's force harried them, striking when they could, but never in open battle against such superior numbers. Rumors hinted that Renly might move his army toward King's Landing, but the city scouts found no sign of his banners yet. Perhaps he was content to wait, letting Tywin and Ned wear each other down. Through it all, Ned wore the crown as though it were an iron yoke. The city pressed in on him, favors requested by merchants, demands from the faith, petitions from every corner of Westeros. Food prices soared, threatening unrest among the smallfolk. Tyrion Lannister remained imprisoned in the city under charges of conspiracy, though Ned considered releasing him to negotiate with Tywin. But the prospect of setting the imp free only to have him join Tywin and come back stronger made Ned hesitate. Finally, on a morning shrouded in grey fog, a raven arrived bearing the seal of House Tully. The message was from Edmure Tully, writing in haste. Your Grace, we have engaged Tywin in battle near the ruins of a small village west of Harrenhal. Ser Barristan commanded valiantly, but we are outnumbered 2-1. We hold the high ground for now, yet Tywin's cavalry presses our flanks. Unless reinforcements arrive, we may be forced to retreat into Harrenhal, ceding the field. Lord Tully begs your immediate aid, lest the Riverlands be lost. Ned felt his heart clench. If Tywin crushed Barristan's host, nothing would stand between him and the city save the walls of King's Landing and the uncertain loyalty of the Gold Cloaks. A full siege could follow, turning the capital into a graveyard. Ned made his decision in an instant. He summoned his knights and lords, the northern men who had arrived, the City Watch loyalists, the loyal houses of the Crownlands. They would march. He stood in the throne room, each step echoing on the marble floor. Soldiers assembled, stirring restlessly. Sansa and Arya hovered at the periphery, wide-eyed and silent. In a corner, Jaime Lannister stood under guard, a sardonic half-smile on his lips. Ned wondered if the Kingslayer anticipated being freed when Tywin arrived. Across the hall, Varys and Littlefinger lingered, watchers of the grand game. Men of the North, men of the Crownlands, Ned began, his voice resonating in the vaulted space. A dire threat marches on us, Tywin Lannister and his might, aided by alliances forged in secrecy. Ser Barristan holds them back, but they need our help. We march now, not to conquer, but to defend the realm. I ask for your courage, your loyalty, and your faith in our cause. A ragged cheer rose, though it lacked the boisterous unity Ned remembered from Robert's day. This was a realm still uncertain. But they would march. Better to face Tywin on the field than await him behind walls. Ned left a garrison to safeguard King's Landing, commanded by Ser Jacelyn Bywater, a man of unshakable honor. He left behind a smaller Kingsguard detail and parted from his daughters with a heavy heart. He wanted to send them to Winterfell, but travel was too dangerous. Instead, they remained in the Red Keep, guarded fiercely by men Ned trusted. As Ned rode out at the head of his host, the columns of men stretching behind him like a serpent of steel and banners, he felt an odd calm settle over him. War was upon them, no more denying it. He would meet it as a Stark of Winterfell, with sword in hand, seeking to protect rather than conquer. The road northward was lined with peasants who peered with exhausted, frightened eyes. The realm had seen too many armies marching, too many lords promising salvation or threatening retribution. On the 7th day of hard riding, they approached the outskirts of Harrenhal, its blackened towers looming against a stormy sky. Smoke curled in the distance. Barristan Selmy's battered force held a defensive line near the ashes of a village, the Red Fork's waters glinting behind them. Lannister banners flickered beyond, an ocean of crimson and gold. Scouts reported Tywin's numbers to be vast, perhaps double Ned's combined forces. Camp was made, lines drawn. Ned met with Barristan in a hastily pitched tent. The old knight's armor bore dents and scorch marks, but his eyes were resolute. Your Grace, we've held them off for days, but Tywin's superior cavalry has worn us down. Edmure Tully's men have fought bravely, but we cannot hold much longer without relief. Ned clasped Barristan's hand. You have done well, sir. We will face Tywin together now. He surveyed a map littered with tokens representing each force. If we can force him to battle on ground of our choosing, we might blunt his advantage in numbers. The ruins of this village, do they offer any choke points? Barristan nodded. A pair of old stone walls and a collapsed watchtower. If we can position archers there, we might hold their advance. The lords conferred and a plan took shape. At sunrise, they would issue a challenge to Tywin, daring him to fight on this broken field. If he advanced recklessly, he might be vulnerable. Yet Tywin was no fool. Ned suspected the Lannister lord would try to flank them or force them back to the river. But they had little choice. Retreat would condemn the Riverlands to torch and sword. That night, Ned walked through the northern camp, speaking quietly with the soldiers. They looked tired, anxious. Many were young men who had never been this far south, never seen a real battle. Some recognized him from Winterfell and smiled with relief, though it was a grim comfort. Ned tried to encourage them without false promises. War was ugly, he knew no words to make it otherwise. When he returned to his tent, Grey Wind stood outside Robb's dire wolf, a phantom from another story, but no, Robb was not here. A pang of longing struck Ned. He missed his son, missed the strong young man he was becoming. If the realm had been at peace, Robb might have journeyed with him as part of a grand tour. Instead, Ned shouldered the crown's burden alone. At dawn, horns blew across the dew-laden fields. The sun crept above the horizon, painting the sky with sullen orange. Tywin's host stirred, formation after formation of armored men, their banners bearing the golden lion. Ned embarrassed and arrayed their forces across the ragged ground, hoping the half-collapsed walls and muddy ditches would slow any Lannister advance. The river lords took positions near the flanks, determined to defend their homeland. Archers perched along the remnants of the village, arrowheads glinting in the morning light. In the distance, Ned could see Tywin's command group, a flash of gold armor, the harsh lines of a proud face. No parley was offered, no last-minute negotiation. The Lannisters had come to crush the Wolf King and avenge the insult to their house. So be it. The horns sounded again, louder, and the Lannister lines began to advance. Ned's throat tightened, but his grip on ice, the ancestral great sword of House Stark, was steady. For the first time since taking the throne, he felt some part of him fully awaken. This was where he had stood beside Robert once, in the rebellion that toppled a mad tyrant. Now he stood to preserve the realm from another tyranny. If the gods were just, they would favor his cause. But war was rarely so simple. A sudden roar tore through the air as the first wave of Lannister cavalry thundered forward. Archers loosed arrows, a dark hail that cut down men and horses. The ground shook under the pounding hooves. Ned bellowed an order, and his infantry braced. Steel clashed with steel, men screamed, horses shrieked. The wet earth churned with blood. Ned rode into the fray, ice-blue eyes scanning for pockets of danger. He directed spearmen to hold a gap between two ruined walls, ensuring the Lannister horsemen could not pour through. Barristan led a charge on the right flank, his white cloak streaming behind him like a banner of old. The clang of swords and shields filled the air, mingling with battle cries and dying gasps. Hour by hour, the fighting raged. Dust clogged the sky, and the sun climbed higher, its heat oppressive. Tywin's forces tried to break Ned's lines, but the narrow terrain and the desperate courage of the defenders kept them at bay. Still, the numbers weighed heavily on Ned's mind. Every fallen Lannister was replaced by another, while each man Ned lost thinned his already outnumbered ranks. Midday brought a lull as both sides regrouped. Corpses littered the field. The ruins of the village were ablaze from flaming arrows, sending thick black smoke curling upward. Ned's armor was stained with grime and blood, his limbs trembling with exhaustion. But he could not rest. He received a hurried report from Edmure Tully. The left flank was dangerously close to collapsing. If the Lannisters crushed it, they would roll up the line. Ned ordered a reinforcement of the left, riding with a company of northern knights to stabilize it. They arrived just in time to see a group of lion-helmed knights break through a wavering shield wall. Ned roared a challenge, plunging ice into a man's chest. The knight toppled, gold helm hitting the mud with a dull clang. Ned pressed on, fending off spear thrusts, the sword's weight familiar in his hands. He glimpsed Barristan in the distance, shining like a beacon as he dueled a line of Lannister men. Suddenly, a horn sounded from beyond the Lannister lines, a clarion call that caused confusion among Tywin's ranks. Another host appeared, banners flapping, emerging from the treeline. For one heart-stopping moment, Ned feared it was Renly's men come to crush them all. But the banners were the Blackfish of House Tully and the Direwolf of House Stark. Reinforcements from the north, led by Roose Bolton, who had marched faster than expected. The Lannisters, caught off guard, reeled as Bolton's forces slammed into their flank. Hope surged through Ned's veins. He redoubled his efforts, shouting for his men to push the advantage. Lannister lines buckled, men turning in panic as they realized they were suddenly outmaneuvered. Amid the chaos, Ned spotted Tywin's personal guard in the distance. The Lion Lord himself was still in command, refusing to yield. Ned spurred his horse forward, determined to end this. If Tywin fell, maybe the rest would break. A press of steel-clad riders met him, a swirling melee that pinned Ned in place. He struggled to keep track of the swirling shapes, his own knights, Lannister swords, dying horses. The clang of metal on metal was deafening. A knight in gilded armor lunged at Ned with a lance, but ice cleaved it aside, biting into the man's shoulder. Another attacker swung a mace at Ned's head, forcing him to duck. The blow glanced off his helm, ringing his skull. He fought on even as his vision blurred from sweat and blood. At last, the Lannister line began to collapse in earnest. Roose Bolton's reinforcements had shattered their flank, and Barristan led a renewed charge in the center. Tywin, seeing the tide turn, sounded a retreat. Horns echoed across the battlefield, prompting scattered groups of Lannister men to disengage. But the retreat threatened to become a rout. Some men threw down their arms, crying for quarter. Ned, chest heaving, withdrew to rally his men, not wanting to press too far and risk an ambush. The day was won, at least for now. The battered survivors of Tywin's force limped westward, leaving behind thousands of dead. Ned dismounted, staggering as the ground spun beneath him. Hands steadied him, Ser Roderick, grim-faced and bloody. "It's over, Your Grace," Roderick said in a hoarse voice. "We've driven them back." Ned peeled off his helm, gulping air thick with the stench of gore. He could hardly believe it. They had won a major victory, though at a terrible cost. He looked around, seeing men in stark livery lying motionless in the mud. The battered survivors of the Tully host sank to their knees, too exhausted to cheer. Shouts of triumph were muted by the sheer horror of the battlefield. Barristan Selmy rode up, sword dripping red. He saluted Ned, then sagged in the saddle. "The Lannisters will lick their wounds now, Your Grace. But this is not the end. Tywin lives." Ned nodded, forcing himself to remain upright. "Then the war goes on. But we have shown the realm we are not so easily swept aside." His voice shook with mingled relief and grief. "We must gather our wounded, see to our dead. We will not dishonor them with haste." He gazed westward, where Tywin's banners receded into a haze of dust. War would continue. Renley, Stannis, the Lannisters, none of them would yield so easily. But for the first time since he had taken the crown, Ned Stark felt that perhaps, by some grace, he might hold this realm together. If the gods willed it, if men of honor stood by him, if the families of Westeros could be shown that unity need not be a fantasy. He held ice, the steel glinting dully in the smoky daylight, a reflection of the battered world he had inherited. All around him, men wept or prayed or sighed in exhausted relief. The living and the dead intermingled in the mud. A king who never sought the throne now carried victory's grim mantle. He stood there in the aftermath, the crowned wolf of the realm, silently promising that if it took his last breath, he would see peace restored to the Seven Kingdoms and pray it might last longer than the next turning of the seasons. Yet even with the smell of death thick in the air and Lannister standards shrinking to the horizon, Eddard Stark understood their victory at Harrenhal was only the first taste of a conflict that would consume all of Westeros if it continued unabated. The field was a ruin, bodies sprawled where they had fallen, some still clutching shattered shields or sundered swords, eyes wide and unseeing. Streams of red trickled into the muddy ditches, mingling with the ashes of the burned-out village. Smoke lingered above the broken walls, drifting into a pale sky that had seen more bloodshed than peace. The sun's rays had reached their zenith, and what was left of the day carried the promise of more hardship. Ned forced himself to remain calm. He was king now, and kings could not surrender to exhaustion or grief. He directed Ser Roderick to begin organizing the field, the wounded first, the dead after. Barristan Selmy, helmet held at his side, offered a tired nod of respect. He might have been made of marble, so still he stood, his white cloak scorched and tattered. Yet his eyes remained keen. Nearby, Roose Bolton's reinforcements sorted themselves, having arrived at precisely the right moment to tilt the day's fortune. Bolton approached with a contingent of northern men, his pale face betraying little emotion. A quiet man, seldom prone to smiles or frowns, Bolton inclined his head to Ned. "Your Grace, the men from the Dread Fort arrived as swiftly as we could manage. We had word of Tywin's approach. I am relieved we found you in time." Ned studied his bannermen, well aware of Bolton's reputation for cold cunning. But in this moment he could not afford to distrust the help that had saved hundreds of lives. "The realm owes you thanks. Had you come but a day later, this field might have belonged to the Lannisters." Bolton dipped his head again. "The Dreadfort's men are yours to command." He cast a glance across the battlefield with unnerving calm, as though carnage and ruin were a mild interest. "What are your orders?" Ned sighed, turning to the old knight who had fought all morning by his side. "Ser Barristan, we must see to the wounded, secure Harrenhal's perimeter, and ascertain Tywin's strength. He withdrew west, but we do not know if it is a feint or a true retreat." Barristan nodded. "We will send scouts. My guess is that Tywin will regroup, perhaps link up with other Lannister forces, or even see if Renley might lend him men if they share a common foe in you. Lord Tywin is never one to abandon a campaign so easily." Ned's face hardened. "The war is far from done. Yet we cannot simply chase Tywin across the countryside. Our own numbers are too few to risk a reckless pursuit. We must hold Harrenhal to deny him this fortress. It is a strong position in the Riverlands." Bolton cast his eyes at the soot-streaked walls of the cursed castle. "It is a grim seat, Your Grace. But strategically it commands the waters and roads." Ned flexed his stiff fingers, feeling the bite of ice's hilt still imprinted on his palm. "Precisely. We'll garrison Harrenhal. Secure the region around it. Then we will send ravens to the river lords to let them know the lion has been pushed back. A wave of relief spread among those who overheard. The men needed hope, they needed to believe that victory was possible and that the Wolf King could protect them. Ned allowed himself a brief moment of gratitude that Bolton's timing had spared them a crushing defeat. Yet he could not ignore the tired lines on Barristan's face or the haunted stares of the soldiers who had survived. The realm bled from countless wounds: Tywin's invasion, Renly's looming ambitions, and Stannis' cold claim on Dragonstone. One battle would not settle it. The weight of that knowledge pressed on Ned like a millstone. Still, he forced himself to remain composed to show the leadership these men desperately needed. They spent the rest of the afternoon tending to the aftermath of war. Archers combed the wreckage for salvageable arrows, maesters moved among the wounded, dispensing what little relief they could. Ned could not walk 3 paces without stepping around a corpse or the twisted remains of a horse. He knelt now and then to close the eyes of a fallen man, lips pressed in a quiet prayer. Their faces, once alive with fear or courage, now looked oddly peaceful in death, though many wore expressions of final horror. This was his burden, his curse, to know that every war begun in the name of protecting the realm demanded a toll from the realm's own children. Night fell slowly. Harrenhal's black spires rose from the gloom like jagged teeth, the castle's vast courtyard lit by flickering torches. The men who had entered its cursed halls set up tents in every corner not claimed by rubble. Vast though Harrenhal was, it felt ominously empty, the ghosts of House Went and countless others lingering in the charred corridors. History remembered how Harren the Black had built it to defy the dragons, only for Aegon's fire to melt its mighty towers. Even centuries later, it felt tainted by an ancient wrath. Ned gathered his closest advisors in a half-collapsed great hall. Ser Barristan, Roose Bolton, Ser Roderick, Edmure Tully, and several river lords, including the Blackwood and Mallister representatives, stood around a crude map pinned to a battered table. Soot drifted from the rafters as a cool wind blew through broken windows. "We have secured the day's victory, but Tywin is far from beaten," Ned began. "We must assume he will gather new levies. The Westerlands are rich and populous, with gold enough to buy sellswords from across the narrow sea. We also cannot discount the possibility that Renley or even Stannis might see an advantage in striking us now, while we are weary." Bolton's voice was soft, yet carried in the echoing hall. "Renley has the reach behind him, or so the rumors say. Stannis has his fleet on Dragonstone. Might either of them join Tywin if it suits their cause?" Edmure Tully, battered but unbowed, shook his head. "I doubt it. The Lannisters slaughtered the Targaryen children, outraged Dorne, and have few friends among the southern lords. Renly might take Lannister gold or men if he thinks it will speed his own coronation, but I suspect he'll keep his distance. As for Stannis, he disdains the Lannisters outright. He sees them as traitors who conceal Joffrey's parentage." Ned exhaled, remembering the gulf that separated him from Stannis. "Stannis is the rightful heir by blood, and I do not doubt his iron sense of law. He will not stoop to an alliance with Tywin or Renly if he believes them usurpers. But that does not mean he will side with me either." Barristan studied the map. "Your Grace, we should consider fortifying the ford at the Trident, controlling crossing points. If Tywin attempts another push, we can harry him on the roads. And if Renly marches from the south, we might have time to respond before he reaches the Blackwater." Ned nodded. "Agreed. But Harrenhal itself is too large to leave half-garrisoned. We must station enough men here to hold it if Tywin tries to siege it directly. The Riverlands have suffered enough. We must prevent him from ravaging them further." They continued debating strategy until the torches had burned low. Finally, Ned called the meeting to an end, mindful that all were exhausted. When the others departed, Edmure lingered, worry etched into his features. He gripped Ned's shoulder gently. "Your Grace, I can never repay what you've done for the Riverlands. My father is ailing, and I must speak for House Tully now. We stand with you, no matter how dark the road ahead. I only wish I had better news to give about my sister." A flash of alarm jolted Ned. "What news of Catelyn?" Edmure sighed. "Only that Lisa has locked herself away in the area again, refusing all entreaties. I do not know if she and Our Lady Mother have even spoken. I had hoped your wife might return by now, or at least send word." Ned's heart clenched. If something had befallen Catelyn, the realm would be a colder place. "I trust she will find a way. She knows the Vale better than most. But your sister's refusal to engage with the rest of Westeros is worrisome. If war continues, we cannot afford the Vale to remain idle, or worse, side with an enemy." Edmure's eyes were heavy with fatigue. "I will do what I can. For now, I remain here at your service. My father's health prevents him from commanding, so the Tully banners answer to me." Ned clapped him on the back. "You have fought well this day. Let us rest now, and perhaps on the morrow we will find a path forward." That night, Ned wandered Harrenhal's haunted corridors in search of a place to lay his head. Yet sleep eluded him. The memories of the battlefield of men dying at his command weighed on his mind. To pass the time, he stood upon a high rampart battered by the chill wind that whistled through the castle's ruined towers. Far below, he could see the lights of campfires in the courtyard, the murmured voices of men nursing wounds or sharing what meager rations they had. He wondered if Robert's ghost roamed these nights somewhere, laughing at the folly of war. Robert had relished battles in his youth, found glory in the charge of steel. But in the end, Robert had died from a boar's tusk and the slow poison of a life spent avoiding the duties of kingship. Perhaps there was a kinder fate than watching the land be torn apart. He tried to think of his children. Robb, in Winterfell, forging his own path as the presumptive heir to House Stark. Bran, Rickon, still so young, left to the care of Maester Luwin and faithful servants. Sansa and Arya, left in King's Landing under the watchful eyes of trusted guards. He felt a pang of guilt. He should have sent the girls north when he first suspected trouble, but the swirl of politics had trapped them in the capital. At least they were not in the Riverlands, exposed to the brutalities of war. That small mercy would have to suffice. Eventually, weariness overtook him. He found a vacant chamber whose walls were less cracked than the others and sank onto a dusty bed. The little sleep he managed was restless, full of nightmares where the faces of the dead accused him in silence. When he woke, gray light filtered through an arrow slit, revealing that dawn had come again. The days that followed blurred into a haze of urgent tasks. Scouts rode out in every direction. One band reported that Tywin had regrouped a safe distance to the west, behind makeshift fortifications. Another carried news that the Lannisters were seeking new levies from minor houses in the Westerlands. Rumors spread of gold shipments headed to hire mercenaries in Essos. Each dawn, Ned prayed he would receive word from King's Landing that no new threats had arrived. But so far, the city remained quiet, though quiet in the capital often meant conspiracies, not peace. One afternoon, as Ned read dispatches beneath the gloom of Harrenhal's hall, a scout arrived breathless with news that a messenger approached under a white flag. Cautious, Ned ordered a small escort to meet the stranger in the open field beyond the castle gates. He rode forth with Ser Roderick, Barristan Selmy, and a handful of guards. The air smelled of char and damp soil. They found the messenger waiting atop a weary horse, carrying a banner of neutrality. He wore the sigil of House Tyrell, a golden rose on a field of green. Ned tensed, suspecting Renly's involvement. The messenger bowed in the saddle, voice echoing across the short distance. "I come bearing letters from King Renly Baratheon, sworn in alliance with Highgarden. I seek an audience with His Grace, Eddard Stark, the Wolf King." Ned exchanged a measured look with Barristan. King Renly, indeed. He signaled for the messenger to follow them inside. In Harrenhal's courtyard, they dismounted, and Ned led the messenger to a quiet alcove near the gatehouse. Soldiers watched warily from all sides. The messenger produced a sealed parchment bearing Renly's sigil as well as the Tyrell rose. Ned broke the seal and read, his eyes scanning the neat, polished script. Renly wrote with typical charisma, addressing Ned as "my old friend's loyal companion," acknowledging Ned's prowess and sense of honor. Yet the content was bracing. Renly proposed a negotiated settlement. Renly would recognize Ned's kingship in the north and the Riverlands if Ned bent the knee to Renly as the primary king of the Seven Kingdoms. In return, Renly pledged to rectify the matter of the Iron Throne by placing Ned as his hand or regent, ensuring the realm's peace. The letter cast Stannis aside as a man too rigid to compromise and declared Joffrey's claim void due to incest. As for Tywin Lannister, Renly offered to unite forces with Ned to crush the Lion once and for all, provided Ned accepted Renly's claim. When he finished reading, Ned felt a swirling mix of emotions. On one hand, Renly's proposal held a certain logic. A united front could end the war swiftly and spare thousands of lives. On the other, it demanded Ned surrender the very crown Robert had entrusted to him. It was precisely the kind of political dance Ned despised, yet it might save the realm from a long bloodbath. He closed his eyes, remembering Robert's booming laugh, the easy way he had flung a giant warhammer in battle as though unstoppable. Would Robert have wanted his younger brother to claim the throne? Or would he have wanted the crown to remain with someone he trusted as he had once trusted Ned? He handed the parchment to Barristan. The old knight read it in silence, then exhaled. Renly has grown ambitious. This is a carefully worded ultimatum. He will not kneel to you, but he offers you a chance to kneel to him. At least it is not as bloodthirsty as Tywin's approach. Ser Roderick frowned. "A cunning ploy, your grace. Renley wants the best of both worlds, your support to strengthen his claim and a promise of peace that leaves you subordinate. The Tyrell messenger stood quietly, awaiting a response. Ned cleared his throat. We will craft our reply. For now, you shall remain under our protection, fed and sheltered. We shall treat you with courtesy as befits the laws of hospitality. The messenger bowed. Thank you, your grace. I await your pleasure. They showed him to a secure chamber where he would rest until Ned decided what to do. After, Ned gathered his council, Barristan, Roose Bolton, Edmure Tully, and the river lords who could attend on short notice. He laid out Renly's proposal, reading key passages aloud. A hush settled as they absorbed the implications. Bolton's voice was measured. Renly offers you a way out of this war. If you accept, we might stamp out Tywin quickly and spare the North further bloodshed. Yet we become vassals of Renly who might decide later to claim the North's fealty in more stringent terms. Edmure crossed his arms. The Tullys do not forget Ned Stark's loyalty. We pledge to follow you, not Renly Baratheon. We have bled to uphold your crown. Barristan ran a hand over his white beard. Renly is charming, but he is not the rightful heir by the laws of succession. Stannis holds that right. And what of Stannis? Would he simply stand aside while Renly cements the throne? It could lead to a war between the brothers in which we would be forced to pick a side. Ned listened, feeling the knot in his chest tighten. Duty again warred with practicality. If he insisted on wearing the crown, he risked turning Renly into a formidable enemy allied with Highgarden and possibly other southern lords. If he yielded, he might save countless lives, but betray the cause that had compelled him in the first place, the cause to protect the throne from the Lannisters and false heirs. If he allied with Renly, how long before Renly's ambition overshadowed all else? In the end, Ned placed his hands flat on the table. I will not bend the knee to Renly Baratheon. Robert named me protector of the realm, not him. Renly claims the throne by right of being Robert's youngest brother, ignoring Stannis' senior claim, ignoring the king's own will. I respect him, but I cannot accept his terms. A faint glimmer of relief crossed Edmure's face. Good. Then we stand as we have stood with you as king. Bolton inclined his head, unreadable as ever. As you command. Barristan looked thoughtful. We risk another front in this war. Renly's letter offered alliance if you bowed, but if you refuse, he may see you as an obstacle. He might ally with Tywin after all, if only to remove you from the throne. Ned's jaw tightened. A risk we must take. I will draft a reply. We will offer an alliance of equals, a compromise wherein we share governance until the realm is at peace and a great council can be called. We can let all the lords of Westeros decide who should rightly sit the Iron Throne with the knowledge of Joffrey's true parentage laid bare. But I will not simply cast aside the crown and hand it to Renly. He paused, considering. Stannis will never attend a great council unless he believes it will confirm him, but perhaps we can still attempt it. This war threatens to become a plague on the entire realm. They broke up the meeting with the plan to send Ned's counteroffer. The Tyrell messenger departed the following day, carrying Ned's carefully written words. He would ride south, presumably to Renly's camp in the Reach. Whether Renly would heed the call for a council or scorn it altogether remained to be seen. In the meantime, Tywin's presence loomed to the west. Scouts reported small raids on outlying farms, forcing Ned to send patrols. The climate of fear persisted. Harrenhal became a hub of anxious war councils. Meanwhile, no word arrived from King's Landing or from Catelyn, who was supposed to be returning from the Vale. Ned wrestled with dread. Too many uncertainties, too many threats. One evening, a chill rain pattered against the broken windows. In the flickering candlelight of Harrenhal's great hall, Ned sat with Barristan over a sparse meal of hard bread and salted beef. The old knight seemed troubled, though he hid it well behind his courtly bearing. After they ate, Barristan cleared his throat. Your Grace, I must speak plainly. I have served 3 kings, and I have seen wars begun for many reasons: honor, revenge, ambition, and fear. This war, it began over Robert's death and the question of succession, yet it now spirals into something far greater. The realm's not had so many men claiming thrones or crowns at once since the days of the Targaryen pretenders. It is a tragedy for the small folk. Ned's eyes were solemn. I know it too well. I have tried to offer peace, but Tywin will not yield, Stannis calls me usurper, and Renly demands I bend the knee. I see no path that does not involve more blood. Barristan studied him. You have done your utmost to preserve honor in this. Yet the burden of kingship may force you to do things you find dishonorable. When the time comes, can you make that choice? A memory rose unbidden in Ned's mind, the day he had agreed to keep Robert's secret, the day he had discovered the truth about Joffrey's parentage and confronted Cersei. Each time he had tried to act with integrity, yet the realm insisted on playing by harsher rules. I will do all I can to protect the innocent, but I will not become a butcher nor a tyrant for the sake of a throne I never wanted. Barristan's expression softened. I believe you, your grace. That is why I follow you. Perhaps there is hope yet that the war can end before it devours us all. Not long after, the watchers on Harrenhal's walls spotted a column of riders approaching from the north. Word spread quickly, and Ned came to the gatehouse, heart racing with anticipation. Could it be more northern bannermen? Or perhaps the vanguard of Robb Stark's own force? His eldest son had stayed behind at Winterfell to safeguard the north, but if Robb had chosen to march south, it might mean he believed his father required aid. When the riders drew closer, Ned recognized the banners of House Karstark. At their head rode Lord Rickard Karstark, grim and quiet. Beside him was a familiar face that made Ned's chest tighten. Theon Greyjoy, ward of House Stark, though he wore a look of uncertainty. Behind them trailed a sizable contingent of northern men, perhaps 2,000 strong, nothing compared to the full might of the north, but still a welcome sight. Ned descended to meet them in the courtyard. Rain spattered the churned mud, and the arrival felt more funereal than triumphant. Karstark dismounted first, sinking into a weary bow. Your grace, the north answers your call. Ned clasped the man's arm. I am grateful to see you here, Lord Karstark. Is Robb well? I did not expect him to send more men so soon. Karstark sighed. Robb remains in Winterfell, your grace. He does not wish to leave the north undefended with so much unrest stirring. But we brought men to bolster your cause. More forces may follow, though winter roads are treacherous. Ned glanced at Theon, who swung down from his horse with a swagger that seemed forced. Theon had always been bold, often brash, but his eyes flickered with the worry of a man who knew he was far from home. Theon, it has been some time. Theon managed a grin. You're a king now, Lord. I mean, your grace. Didn't see the coming when I first arrived at Winterfell. Ned only nodded, uncertain how to navigate the tension that had always existed between them. Theon, after all, was the hostage son of Balon Greyjoy, but had become something of a foster son to Ned. I value your sword here, Ned said. We have need of every good fighter. The realm is in disarray. Karstark's men settled into Harrenhal's courtyard. They carried grim tidings, rumors that the Iron Islands stirred once more, that Balon Greyjoy might be plotting another rebellion if the war on the mainland continued. Theon bristled at the suggestion, but admitted he had no recent word from Pike. Ned felt his troubles mounting by the moment. Still, an influx of 2,000 men was no small thing. They would help solidify Harrenhal's defenses and perhaps reinforce any expedition Ned chose to mount against Tywin. But no plan could be made lightly. A reckless assault might shatter the tenuous advantage they currently held. As a cold dawn broke a few days later, Ned assembled a force of knights and foot soldiers on the broad plain outside Harrenhal's main gates. He intended to move west, scouting Tywin's position in person, hoping to ascertain if the Lannister lord was truly weakened or preparing a trap. Barristan volunteered to lead the expedition, but Ned insisted on accompanying him. A king who expected men to die in his name ought to face those dangers as well. The lords balked, but Ned reminded them that he was not the sort of ruler who watched war from a safe distance. They rode out under drizzling skies. The ground sucked at the horses' hooves and a damp chill hung in the air. 20 leagues away, the land began to slope upward into rolling hills. Here, they found signs of the Lannister withdrawal, broken wagons, abandoned tents, the stench of rotting corpses left unburied. A few crows pecked at the remains. Ned's party pressed on, scanning the horizon for any sign of armed forces. By midday, they neared the spot where the scouts had last spotted Lannister encampments. To Ned's surprise, the fields lay empty except for more debris and scattered footprints leading deeper west. It looked as though Tywin had pulled back even farther. Was he waiting to muster more men? Or did he fear another direct clash? Barristan conferred with the scouts, who returned from galloping ahead. They found no large host, only remnants of outriders. It seems Tywin is avoiding another pitched battle with us, at least for now. Ned frowned, feeling uneasy. Tywin was not a man known for cowardice. If he was retreating, it might be to lure them west, away from King's Landing, away from the seat of Ned's power. Or to lead them into a region more loyal to the Lannisters, where Tywin could crush them with reinforcements. They made camp on a low ridge, with pickets set around the perimeter. The night was cold and starless, an unsettling silence draping the countryside. Around the campfires, men exchanged stories of the Harrenhal battle, speaking in hushed tones about the rumors of magic and curses that clung to the fortress. Ned stood apart, hood drawn, scanning the dark horizon. He thought of Winterfell's godwood, its ancient heart tree where he had found solace so many times. Here, under southern skies, he felt no such comfort. The old gods seemed remote, overshadowed by fear and distrust. A distant horn echoed after midnight, jerking everyone awake. Men scrambled to arms, expecting a Lannister attack, but it was one of Ned's own outrider horns signaling an arrival. A moment later, riders emerged from the darkness under a banner of House Tully. Leading them was Catelyn Stark, cloaked and weary, hair damp from the night's mist. Relief flooded Ned at the sight of her, safe and whole. She dismounted, ignoring protocol, and threw her arms around him. His arms closed around her shoulders, the tension of weeks momentarily dissolving. She smelled of travel and horse sweat, but he only felt gratitude that she was alive. When they parted, her eyes were taut with worry. "Thank the gods I found you," she said quietly. "The Vale? Lisa refuses to muster troops for our cause. She claims her duty is to defend her son, the new Lord of the Eyrie, above all else. I pleaded with her, but she would not listen." Ned gritted his teeth. "So the Vale will remain aloof even as the realm burns?" Catelyn nodded grimly. She insisted the Vale stay out of the wars of usurpers, as she called them. "It was not safe for me to remain there any longer, so I slipped away with a few men loyal to Riverrun. I was determined to reach you, no matter how far west you had gone." He held her hands, feeling the chill in her fingers. "At least you're safe now. Come, we'll find you warmth." In Ned's tent, lit by a single lantern, she explained more. "It's worse than we feared. Lisa has been sending ravens to potential allies, but I do not know whom she courts. She may be speaking to Stannis or even to Renley, seeking an arrangement that benefits the Vale alone. The region is well defended, so she believes she can choose her moment to intervene." Ned sank onto a camp stool, fatigue lining his face. "So the Vale is as lost to us as Dorne. We have no promise of help from either. Dorne still waits to see which way the wind blows, though they loathe the Lannisters. Meanwhile, Renly grows stronger in the south, Tywin lurks in the west, and Stannis brandishes law from Dragonstone." Catelyn's eyes were determined. "What will you do now?" He thought of the men who had followed him this far, the battles and bloodshed, the desperate hope that the realm could be saved from a worse fate. "We hold the Riverlands for now, but we cannot simply wait for Tywin to rebuild his strength and strike again. Nor can we ignore the possibility that Renly might launch a push toward King's Landing. I must return to Harrenhal, gather the lords, and decide if we move to protect the capital. I left Ser Jacelyn Bywater and a skeleton garrison in King's Landing. They might not hold off a serious assault." They exchanged a glance, each reading the other's fears. Ned rose, pressing a hand gently to her cheek. "We march back in the morning. The men are exhausted, but we must move quickly. Too many forces swirl around us, and the city is vulnerable." True to his word, at dawn Ned ordered the camp packed. They rode eastward with caution, scanning the horizon for any sign of Lannister ambush. The fields and roads were eerily empty, marked only by the muddy tracks of past armies. After some days, they reached Harrenhal again, the fortress looming like a brooding titan. The men within greeted them with relief, yet also brought troubling news. A raven from King's Landing reported disturbances in Flea Bottom, unrest over food shortages, and rumors that Renly Baratheon's envoys had been seen speaking with influential nobles in the capital. Tension simmered close to boiling. Ned wasted no time. He convened a hurried council in Harrenhal's courtyard, for the great hall still reeked of smoke and misery. Catelyn stood by his side, listening intently. Roose Bolton reported that Tywin had not made a serious move since the last battle, aside from a few raids. Barristan relayed that the men were fatigued, their numbers still recovering. Edmure Tully confirmed the River Lords were anxious but holding firm. Karstark's forces had provided fresh bodies, though not enough to mount an invasion of the Westerlands. All the while, King's Landing teetered on the verge of famine or chaos, uncertain whether Ned's rule would survive if an enemy army appeared at its gates. At length, Ned's brow furrowed. "We cannot continue like this, pinned down in the Riverlands while the city grows restless. One spark and the gold cloaks might riot, or the people might turn on the crown. If Tywin and Renly both seize the moment, they could trap us between hammer and anvil." Bolton's quiet voice cut through the din. "Then we must choose the ground upon which we fight next. Return to the city, strengthen it, present a formidable defense. If Tywin pursues, we force him into a siege. Renly might or might not advance, but if he does, we keep him outside the walls. The question is whether King's Landing can hold so many men. The city will strain under the burden." Ned glanced at Catelyn. She gave a tight nod. "We might do better to fortify the city's walls than linger in Harrenhal. The seat of the Iron Throne remains the symbol of royal authority. You're the king, Ned, you must uphold that image, or the realm's lords will suspect weakness. Ser Roderick scratched his whiskers. A siege could be disastrous if supplies run short, but it might also buy time for reinforcements from the north to arrive. Robb and the rest of the bannermen could march in greater force once winter stores are secured. After a moment, Ned made his decision. We march for King's Landing within the fortnight. Harrenhal will keep a garrison sufficient to hold out against any minor Lannister assault. Lord Bolton, I leave you in charge of the castle. You will have enough men to defend these walls. I will take most of the army back to the city. If Tywin tries to besiege us there, at least we have the advantage of the capital's defenses. We can coordinate ravens with you if the situation changes. Bolton dipped his head. I shall see that Harrenhal remains yours. May the old gods watch over you on the road. Thus began another grueling stretch of travel. Within days, Ned assembled the column of soldiers, Northerners, Riverlanders, Crown Loyalists. Many of them bore scars from the recent battles, but they marched with a sense of purpose. To some, King's Landing was a pit of corruption and southern deceit. Yet it was also the heart of the realm, and if Ned Stark was truly king, he must hold that heart. They departed in gloomy weather, skirting the scorched villages and farmland Tywin's men had ravaged. More refugees crowded the roads, peasants fleeing burnt homesteads with nowhere safe to go. Ned ordered the soldiers to share what provisions they could spare, though resources were limited. The sight of starved children, vacant-eyed and clutching scraps of clothing, gnawed at his conscience. This was what war did, it devoured the weak first. Catelyn often rode near Ned, occasionally dismounting to walk among the weary refugees, giving comfort where she could. Her presence reminded them that not all knights and nobles were heartless. Yet Ned noticed the flicker of despair in her gaze as she met each family. Words of solace only went so far when the entire kingdom reeled from strife. Outside Maidenpool, they encountered a small band of hedge knights bearing the Stag and Wolf sigils. They had served in the Riverlands, then peeled off to escort fleeing smallfolk. They bowed to Ned, explaining they had come across Lannister scouts harassing travelers on the Rosby Road. The knights fought them off, but expected more trouble. Ned commended their bravery, offering them a place in his service. They accepted eagerly, having witnessed enough of Tywin's cruelty to choose sides without hesitation. At last, the walls of King's Landing rose in the distance, stony ramparts glimmering in the afternoon sun. Ned felt a surge of conflicting emotions, relief to be near his daughters again, dread at the city's labyrinth of intrigues. The gold cloaks manning the gates looked haggard, but they straightened at the sight of the king's returning host. People in the streets stood aside, some silent, some cheering half-heartedly. Others cursed under their breath, resentful of the High Lords who brought war to their doorsteps. The disparity was clear. Those who believed in Ned's justice eyed him with hope, while many more only cared that war had ruined their livelihoods. He led the column up to the Red Keep, the fortress crowning Aegon's high hill. Stone-faced guards parted to let them inside. Ned dismounted in the courtyard, where Ser Jacelyn Bywater greeted him with a solemn bow. Your Grace. The city grows tense. There have been food riots in Flea Bottom. We do our best to keep order, but the common folk blame the war for driving up prices. Some whisper that Renley would feed them better or that Stannis would bring justice. Ned handed his reins to a stable boy. I regret I could not return sooner. Have there been any moves by Renly's agents here? Bywater hesitated. They come by ship now and again, quietly. I suspect they're sowing discontent, promising coin or bread if the people support Renly's claim. And there have been whispers that Cersei Lannister's allies still lurk in the city, though we have yet to uncover a solid conspiracy. Ned's gaze flicked to Catelyn. She wore a troubled expression. We must root out any traitors swiftly, or we risk sabotage when we can least afford it. Ser Jacelyn, you have done well to keep the peace so far. We will reinforce the watch with men from my host. That should help quell any immediate unrest. While the soldiers filtered into the barracks or set up camp in the outer wards, Ned and Catelyn hurried into the Red Keep. They found Sansa and Arya in the Queen's apartments, rooms once intended for Cersei, now nominally belonging to the king's family, though Ned had not forced either girl to remain there. The girls rushed forward at the sight of their mother, arms flung wide. Sansa wept openly, relief shining in her tearful blue eyes, while Arya clung to Catelyn with fierce intensity. Ned stood back a moment, letting them have their reunion before stepping in. Arya gave him a quick, tight hug, and Sansa curtsied with a trembling smile. We heard rumors the war was going badly, Sansa said, her voice quavering. We were so worried. Arya scowled. I wanted to come fight. Syrio says I've learned a lot, but nobody would let me. Catelyn stroked Arya's cheek. You belong here safely. It's good to see you both unhurt. Ned's heart felt full, but also heavy with the knowledge of all that lay ahead. Your mother and I will do our best to keep you safe. Things in the city may be tense, so please listen to our instructions." He could see Sansa's anxiety. She had once dreamed of being a queen to a fair-haired prince, only to have that dream shattered by Joffrey's cruelty and the truth of his parentage. Now she lived in a castle full of uncertain politics. Arya, meanwhile, bristled at being cooped up, her restless spirit ever yearning for action. Yet for now, they were alive and together. It would have to be enough. In the coming days, Ned convened the small council once more, the seats half empty. Varys appeared in his trademark silks, offering measured bows and cryptic counsel. Grand Maester Pycelle shuffled in, complaining of ailments and the city's unrest, still wearing Lannister loyalty in the way his eyes darted whenever Ned mentioned Tywin. Peter Baelish arrived in subdued finery, a cunning smile playing on his lips. Barristan Selmy took a seat to Ned's right, while Catelyn stood behind Ned, arms crossed. The room felt strangely hollow without the presence of those who had fled or died. Yet the intrigues continued unabated. Varys reported that the tension in Flea Bottom had ebbed slightly with the arrival of Ned's men, but the slightest spark might incite fresh riots if the bread supply failed. Pycelle droned on about the necessity of borrowing more coin to pay for war expenses. Ned felt a stab of frustration, recalling how Robert had left the treasury deep in debt. War only dug the hole deeper. Baelish toyed with a quill. "Your Grace, with the city so close to unrest, might I suggest a lavish distribution of food in the markets? It would quell the small folks' complaints, and they might learn to love their Wolf King for generosity." Ned shot him a skeptical look. "We can barely feed our own troops. The countryside is ravaged by Lannister foragers and the general chaos of war. Where do we find extra grain?" Baelish's smile was thin. "I have contacts in the free cities who can sell us provisions at a premium, naturally. If the crown were to guarantee repayment, we might buy enough to stave off outright starvation." It sickened Ned to think of plunging the realm deeper into debt, but the alternative was letting the people starve. "Make the arrangements," he said at last. "But mind that we do not sacrifice everything to foreign debt. The war must end before the crown is bankrupted beyond repair." After the meeting, Ned called Baelish aside, pinning him with a stern gaze. "Lord Baelish, you are skilled at sniffing out conspiracies. I need to know if Renley has agents here beyond what we suspect, and if any of the highborn houses in the city plot with the Lannisters." "I will not abide treachery." Baelish's laughter was soft. "Your Grace, I live to serve. But you must realize, in a city like this, everyone conspires with everyone else in some small way. If you want me to unearth all of it, best give me a large spade." Ned's frown deepened. "I only ask that you keep me informed of any true threat. Do not treat this as a game." Baelish's mocking smile faded. "The game is real enough, Your Grace. I shall do my part." Ned watched him depart, uneasy. Peter Baelish thrived on chaos, turning secrets into power. Yet Ned needed every advantage in this maelstrom of claimants and houses. If Baelish truly uncovered a lethal conspiracy, it might save the city from sabotage. But Ned vowed to keep a careful eye on the man, for trusting him blindly would be folly. In the nights that followed, King's Landing seemed to hold its breath. The gold cloaks patrolled every district, the outer gates watched carefully for spies. Ned took to walking the walls again, scanning the darkness for any sign of armies approaching. At times, he wondered if Tywin or Renley might appear at the city's outskirts without warning, a storm of steel. But the horizon remained empty. Until a fortnight later, when a scout galloped through the gate at dawn, half frozen with fear. The man burst into the Red Keep, demanding an audience. Ned, roused from uneasy sleep, received him in the throne room where the Iron Throne cast long shadows in the pale morning light. The scout dropped to one knee, panting. "Your Grace, word from Rosby. Renly Baratheon approaches from the south, a great host at his back. Lord Mace Tyrell rides with him, banners for miles. They say 20,000 men or more heading this way along the Rose Road." A ripple of tension passed through the assembled guards. Ned tightened his hands on the pommel of his sword. Renly had decided to make his move. "How far are they?" "Less than a week's march. The roads are clear and they MOV. Ease swiftly." Ned turned to Barristan, standing at his side. "Gather the council. We must prepare. If Renly means to besiege the city, we shall meet him at the gates." Within hours, horns sounded throughout King's Landing, calling men to arms. Scouts raced along the southern roads to confirm the approach. Panicked small folk crowded the streets, some trying to flee, others barricading themselves indoors. Soldiers hurried to the walls with crossbows and pikes. Ned ordered the catapults readied, the gates reinforced. Catelyn stood with him atop the battlements, looking out at the countryside beyond the city. "If Renly comes with so many men, can we withstand a siege? The city is vast, but so is his army. Ned's jaw clenched. We will hold as long as we can. Perhaps we can parley before blood is spilled. He did not relish the idea of defending King's Landing in a second siege so soon after Robert's rebellion had ended the Mad King's reign. War repeated itself in cycles as if the land were cursed to never know lasting peace. On the third day after the warning, banners appeared on the horizon: golden roses of House Tyrell, green and gold stag of Renley, the rowan of House Rowan, the oak of House Oakhart, the fox and flowers of House Florent. A southern coalition marched to install Renly Baratheon on the Iron Throne. Rows of knights in gleaming plate stretched for leagues, the sunlight dancing off steel helms. Ned stood on the parapet, heart pounding. Was Renly truly prepared to unleash war upon the capital? As the host drew closer, drums and horns echoed across the fields. The watchers on the walls shouted sightings. The host was forming ranks beyond bowshot. Siege engineers towed wagons laden with lumber, perhaps to build siege towers or rams. The tension in the city coiled tighter than a drawn bowstring. At midday, a small group of riders emerged from Renly's lines, bearing white flags of truce. Ned recognized the Tyrell sigil among them, along with Renly's personal banner. They halted within sight of the city's walls. One of them raised a horn, blowing a single resonant note, the call for parley. Ned breathed in, then called to the gate captain. "Open the gates enough for me and a small escort to pass. We meet them outside." He wanted to avoid letting Renly's negotiators inside the city, lest it turn to treachery. Instead, Ned would ride out under the eyes of archers, ensuring some measure of safety. A retinue formed around him: Barristan Selmy, Ser Roderick Castle, Theon Greyjoy, and a dozen knights. Catelyn insisted on coming, but Ned refused, stating that if parley went ill, someone must remain to lead in his stead. She reluctantly agreed, standing atop the battlements as Ned and his men rode forth through the massive gates. The grassland outside King's Landing was a flat expanse of open field. Ned halted a short distance from the white-flagged group. He could see Renly Baratheon clearly now. A tall, striking man in green and gold armor, a crown of golden antlers resting atop his black hair. Beside him sat Margaery Tyrell, slender and regal, wearing a half-helm and a traveling cloak. Lord Mace Tyrell was present, as well as Ser Loras Tyrell, the Knight of Flowers, clad in shining plate with a plume of blue roses on his helm. A handful of other southern lords accompanied them, all bearing themselves with an air of confidence. Renly urged his horse forward. He regarded Ned with a mixture of warmth and challenge. "Lord Stark, no, I should say, King Eddard. It has been some time. I see you wear the crown well." Ned kept his tone guarded. "Renly, so you style yourself king as well?" Renly's smile flickered. "I have the support of many great houses. The realm is tired of Lannister perfidy and the threat of endless war. I come to claim the throne in my own right as Robert's younger brother and the chosen ally of the Reach." Ned's gaze swept over the lines of knights behind Renly, the forest of spears and shields. "A pity you did not seek a truce sooner. We might have avoided this confrontation." Mace Tyrell boomed, "The throne is not for the taking, Stark. Robert's bloodline points to Renly or Stannis, and we choose Renly. Bow to him, and you may keep the North and your titles." Ned felt the weight of thousands of eyes on him. He drew himself up. "I have offered to call a great council to settle the matter of succession peacefully. You have refused. Instead, you march an army to the gates of the capital, threatening to plunge the city into siege." Renly spread his hands. "I did not want it to come to this, believe me. But you cling to a crown that is not yours by blood, nor by the realm's consent. My dear brother Stannis is too stern and unyielding to unite the lords. I, on the other hand, have secured alliances that can restore peace, if only you will step aside." Ned's eyes flicked to Margaery Tyrell, poised on her horse. She regarded him with calm assurance, as though she were already queen in all but name. Ser Loras sat close by, ever her protector. "You promise peace, but your approach is an act of war," Ned said quietly. "I stand by Robert's last will. He named me protector of the realm. Circumstances forced me to accept the crown for the realm's sake when Joffrey was proven illegitimate." Renly's mouth tightened. "Then you would deny me my birthright." Barristan Selmy spoke up, voice echoing in the still air. "Lord Renly, King Eddard offers you a chance for a council. Why will you not agree? If the lords of the realm favor you, they will choose you in due course." Renly's gaze flicked to the old knight. "Ser Barristan, you served my brother loyally. But the realm does not have time for councils and endless debates, not with Tywin Lannister ravaging the Riverlands and Stannis poised to strike from Dragonstone. The Tyrells have entrusted their men to me, and they expect results. I will not watch Westeros drown in blood while we gather lords to bicker." Ned's hands clenched on the reins. "So you would force me to surrender the crown here and now, or else you lay siege to the city?" Renly's eyes held a flash of regret. I would rather avoid bloodshed. But yes, that is the choice I offer. Surrender and swear fealty, and I will let you keep your lordship of the North. I know you never wished to be king. Relinquish that burden and join me in saving Westeros from further chaos. A hush followed his words, the weight of them settling like an iron cloak around Ned's shoulders. He glanced back at the distant walls where the people of King's Landing waited in fear. If he refused, thousands could die, the city sacked, the realm descending further into war. Yet if he yielded, what became of Robert's final wish and all those who had fought at Ned's side, believing in his cause? He found himself recalling the blood-soaked field by Harrenhal, the men who had died under Stark and Tully banners, the families who had lost everything. Could he, in good conscience, dismiss their sacrifice, tell them it was all for naught? And there was Tywin Lannister still unbowed, Stannis claiming lawful right, the Vale refusing to commit. Even if Ned yielded to Renly, would that end the war, or simply spark a new conflict with Stannis? He forced himself to speak evenly. You give me no easy choice. Marjorie Tyrell urged her horse forward apace, voice soft yet carrying. Your Grace, my husband-to-be offers you an honorable path. You were always known for your sense of duty. Let that guide you now for the good of the realm. Ned exhaled, mind racing. He saw Barristan at his side, loyal to the end, awaiting his decision. He remembered Catelyn urging him to protect their family above all. He pictured Sansa and Arya's faces, innocent despite all they had seen. The city walls stood behind him, a silent testament to the fragile peace he was meant to uphold. Then he met Renly's gaze. If I relinquish my crown, how can I be sure you will not cast me aside the moment the war is won? Renly lifted his chin. I give you my word. Serve as my hand or regent if you prefer. You are beloved by the North and the Riverlands. Keep those titles. I will confirm them. We will unite the realm quickly, then turn our combined strength against Tywin Lannister and any who still threaten us. Once the realm is secure, we can call a great council to formalize everything, if that is your wish. Silence stretched, broken only by the faint rustle of pennants in the breeze. Ned could sense the longing among his men for an end to war. He saw the hopeful glint in Theon Greyjoy's eye. Perhaps Theon saw a chance to prove loyalty and avoid further bloodshed. But there was also the tension in Ser Roderick's posture, the memory of all that had been sacrificed for Ned's kingship. Finally, Ned drew a breath. I cannot make this decision lightly. Give me one day. Let us meet at dawn tomorrow. I will give you my answer then. If your intentions are truly peaceful, you can wait a single night for me to consult my council and my family. Renly's shoulders relaxed slightly. Very well. At dawn tomorrow, we parley again. If you refuse, I must do what I have come to do. They exchanged curt nods. Ned turned his horse and rode back toward the gate, his escort forming around him. He could feel the eyes of the Tyrell host, thousands strong, tracking his every move. Once inside, the great gates thundered shut. The city remained on high alert, archers bracing at the walls, heated sand, and pitch readied should a siege begin. But for this single day, at least, there would be no bloodshed. In the throne room, Ned dismissed most of the guards, keeping only his closest advisors and family. The Iron Throne loomed behind him, its twisted metal a reminder of the cost of conquest. Catelyn, Sansa, and Arya stood together, concern etched on their faces. Barristan Selmy, Ser Roderick, Peter Baelish, Varys, and Pycelle formed a loose circle. Silence stretched as Ned explained Renly's demand. When he finished, Arya blurted, "He can't do that." "That's not fair." Sansa looked torn, her eyes darting between her mother and father. "If we keep fighting, won't people starve?" Catelyn took Ned's hand. "You have always done what's right for the realm. Is it right to let the city burn in a siege? Or should we yield to Renly for the sake of peace? But then what of Stannis and what of Tywin? Will they stand aside or challenge him?" Ned rubbed his brow. "Renly claims we can unite and finish Tywin swiftly. Perhaps that's true, but Stannis will remain a threat. And what of the men who died believing in my crown? Would I not betray them by casting it aside now? I must weigh all these things in my heart." Barristan bowed his head. "Your Grace, I stand ready to fight if you choose to keep the crown. But if you judge that yielding will save the realm, you would not lose my respect. I know how heavy this burden weighs." Pycelle cleared his throat, voice wavering. "The city is ill-prepared for a long siege. We could hold out for some moons, but the larders are not full. Our food supply might last if rationed, yet the small folk will suffer first. Disease could spread. Riots may follow. A siege is a harsh trial." Varys added, "And let us not forget that Tywin Lannister might pounce on whichever side appears weaker in the coming weeks. Should we be locked in a siege against Renly, Tywin might swoop in and crush us both, or pick the winning side at the last moment in exchange for leniency. The realm would drown in blood. Baelish's lips curved into that subtle half-smile. Truly, what a predicament. And if you yield, Ned, you will become the man who gave up a crown he never wanted. Some might call you wise. Others might call you a craven. All will call you dethroned. But no doubt it's better than a corpse, no? Ned fixed Baelish with a level stare. Your counsel is always so reassuring. Baelish spread his hands unperturbed. Realistic, my dear king. Though I won't call you that tomorrow if you choose to kneel to Renley. Catelyn gripped Ned's arm more tightly. It is your decision, husband. I see no easy path. But I will stand by whatever you choose. A hush fell over them. Ned could almost hear his own heartbeat, a steady drum in the silence of the throne room. He glanced at the Iron Throne, that monstrous seat of swords hammered together by Aegon the Conqueror. How many good men had died for it, how many families shattered? He closed his eyes, recalling Robert's voice, raw with pain on his deathbed. Take care of my realm, Ned, make it right. You do it, they can't. He exhaled, remembering the flames of war at Harrenhal, the small folk who had lost everything. At last, he spoke, voice low. I must pray on this. Dawn is not far off. If I choose to remain king, I will fight with all my strength. If I choose to yield, I will do so knowing it might spare thousands. With that, Ned dismissed them, left alone with Catelyn in the echoing chamber. She gently guided him to sit on the steps at the base of the Iron Throne. Wordlessly, she placed a hand against his cheek. He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. Outside the walls, Renly's army waited like a drawn bow. The city thrummed with tension. The night passed slowly. Ned paced the halls of the Red Keep, stepping at times onto a balcony overlooking the dark city. Torches flickered in the streets below, the shapes of patrolling guards weaving in and out of the gloom. Far in the distance, beyond the city walls, he could imagine the legion of southern knights camped under the stars, readying themselves for a battle that might decide the fate of the Seven Kingdoms. He climbed to the royal apartments to check on his daughters, finding them dozing fitfully. Sansa stirred, half-waking, and he brushed her hair back, promising everything would be all right, even though he did not know if he believed it. Arya slept with her hand curled near the wooden practice sword Syrio had given her. The sight made Ned's throat tighten. If war erupted, could he keep them safe? Eventually, he drifted to the godwood, far smaller than Winterfell's, yet still a piece of quiet in the midst of the city. The weirwood tree here was slender, with pale bark and red leaves. Its face was faintly carved, tears of sap forming along the lines. Ned rested a hand on the trunk, remembering the old gods of the north. He closed his eyes, murmuring a silent plea for wisdom. What would keep the realm from further ruin? When dawn lightened the sky, Ned felt he had made his choice. He rejoined Catelyn in their chamber, where she waited anxiously, dawn's glow outlining her face. He spoke quietly, a certain calm settling in his voice. I cannot yield. Robert's trust, the men who fought and died for this cause, the truth of Joffrey's illegitimacy, the threat of Tywin Lannister and Stannis alike, it would not end with me kneeling to Renly. We would only trade one war for another. If I yield, I fear half my bannermen in the north and the Riverlands would feel betrayed, and we would face rebellions of our own. The realm might fracture further. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Then you will refuse Renly's ultimatum? I will refuse. But I will offer him one last chance at negotiation, some arrangement that does not involve me discarding the crown entirely. If he insists on taking the throne by force, so be it. We will fight for the city and for the realm. Tears slipped down Catelyn's cheeks. I only pray the cost will not be too great. I stand beside you. Always. They held each other a moment, sharing the quiet realization that they might be on the brink of catastrophe. But Ned's resolve had solidified. He was no power-hungry tyrant. He was a man who believed in keeping faith, no matter how dire the path. The horns sounded again at sunrise, signaling that the parley time approached. Ned, dressed in mail and leather, donned a plain circlet of gold rather than a grand crown. He buckled ice to his side, that ancient great sword, a symbol of Stark lineage and duty. With Barristan, Ser Roderick, and a small contingent, he rode through the gates once more, where Renly and his retinue waited in the same spot as before. Renly wore the same golden antlered crown, the morning sun making him appear every inch the noble king. Marjorie Tyrell stood behind him, her expression composed and resolute. Loras Tyrell held his reins, face set. The hush of anticipation crackled like lightning in the air. Renly's host sprawled behind him in neat ranks, ready to march or fight at a word. They drew close enough for voices to carry. Renly inclined his head in greeting. You have had your night of counsel. What say you, Eddard Stark? Ned's spine was rigid, his voice steady. I cannot yield my crown to you. I was named protector by Robert Baratheon, and I have bled to uphold the realm. If you truly seek peace, I invite you to stand beside me as an ally. We can co-rule until such time as a great council can decide the rightful monarch. My crown shall remain mine until that day." An audible stir ran through Renly's companions. Mace Tyrell's brow furrowed and Loras Tyrell glowered. Marjorie's expression remained unreadable, her gaze flicking between Ned and Renly. As for Renly, the corners of his mouth tightened. "So you force my hand," he said. "I offered you a peaceful resolution, and you refuse. Then I must press my claim. You leave me no choice." Ned's voice hardened. "It is you who leave no choice. I have offered a fair compromise." Renly let out a breath, nodding curtly to Mace Tyrell. The Lord of Highgarden raised a hand and horns blared from the ranks. The southern host began to shift, forming into lines of battle. The tension crackled louder. Men reached for their weapons on both sides. It felt as though the air might erupt in violence any moment. "Then we shall see which claim the gods' favor," Renly said coldly. "Prepare yourself, King Eddard. When this day is done, only one crown will remain." Ned wheeled his horse around, returning swiftly to the city's gates, the horns of the gold cloaks echoing from the walls. King's Landing braced for war, archers scrambling to the battlements. Civilians rushed for cover, terrified by the sight of tens of thousands of armed men poised to clash. Back inside, Ned gave hurried orders to defend the walls. The men who had fought at Harrenhal steeled themselves once again, setting up along ramparts and towers. Ned took a moment to clasp Barristan's arm. "We stand fast. Renly's men outnumber us, but we have the walls." Barristan inclined his head. "The King's Landing walls are formidable. His cavalry will do him little good unless he breaks the gates or scales the ramparts. We might hold them off, at least for a time." Thus began the siege of King's Landing, though the first hours passed with little more than posturing. Renly's army formed a wide crescent around the southern and eastern walls, out of arrow range, building field fortifications and watch tents. Ned sent forth a few well-aimed catapult shots to discourage any closer approach, but there was no major assault yet. Renly was methodical, perhaps waiting for siege engines or more men to arrive from the Reach. Inside the city, tension rose to a fever pitch. The small folk whispered of famine, of dragons that once defended the city, of the Mad King's wildfire hidden in vaults beneath the streets. Fear and rumor grew together like strangling vines. That evening, as Ned stood on a rampart with Caitlin, they could see torches dotting the fields beyond the walls. Renly's camp looked like a ring of fire encircling the city. The wind carried the distant clamor of horses, blacksmiths forging weapons, men shouting orders. The siege had truly begun. Caitlin's face was drawn. Her voice hushed. "If Renly storms the walls, the bloodshed will be terrible." Ned's jaw set. "We must hold. If we break, not only do we lose the crown, I lose any chance to protect the realm from further chaos. I pray the day does not come when we must meet them in open battle outside the city, but if it does, we stand on our honor." She slipped her hand into his. Below them, the lamplit streets of King's Landing lay in uneasy silence. Above, the sky glimmered faintly with stars. Ned wondered if they would witness the city set ablaze before this war ended. They were perched on the edge of a knife, with Tywin to the west, Stannis to the east, Renly at the gates, and uncertain lords scattered throughout the realm. Yet for all the doubt gnawing at him, Eddard Stark knew he had no regrets about refusing to yield. He had been entrusted with the fate of the Seven Kingdoms by a dying friend, and if war was the price of remaining true to that trust, so be it. Duty demanded he stand firm against the storms gathering at his doorstep. The horns echoed again from beyond the walls, signaling movements in the enemy lines. Ned and Caitlin watched the flicker of distant torches, bracing for the possibility that dawn might bring the first assault. A king who never wanted the throne now faced another man who coveted it, and the realm lay like kindling between them. Yet Ned Stark held his honor like a shield, resolved that if the gods still heeded mortal prayers, they might guide him to save this kingdom from its own devouring flames.